Welcome back to r/Neighbors from Hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Making Up Property Lines. My wife and I moved into our current house in the summer of 2020. We loved this house right at first sight. We put in an offer and we couldn't be happier that we actually got the house. It is not perfect by any means, but it is our first house together. We are in our late 20s. However, when we looked at the house on Google Maps, on our Maps app, etc., there always seemed to be a for sale sign in front of the house and thought it was odd because it is such a nice house. Anyway, the house is semi-detached and is attached only by the garage. I was not thrilled about this, but whatever, I could overlook that. The house also had about 3 to 4 security cameras around the front. After owning the house for a couple of weeks, we speak with a few of our new neighbors, and every time they ask us about our next door neighbor, the neighbor from hell, and ask, how has she been so far? For a little background, our neighbor from hell is a divorced woman in, I believe, her 70s. She rarely leaves her property and looks very unkempt. She is also the next door neighbor who is attached at our garage. Neighbor from hell has been a bit weird but nice. We mind our own business and kept things cordial, learning via the rest of the neighborhood that she is a bit off. As we got to know the neighbor from hell, we find out that neighbor from hell and the previous owners of our new house were at war with each other. We never spoke with the previous owners at that point in time, but the neighbor from hell had nothing but bad things to say about them. Oh well, not our problem. So, getting to the meat of this story, having a garage attached to her house/garage, our driveways are also connected. While we were chatting with her outside one day, we told her how we were looking into tearing up our driveway in order to get a new stamped concrete driveway. The driveway was a brick one, identical to hers. We wanted it changed because weeds would constantly come through the cracks between the bricks and would look awful. Neighbor from hell never raised any objections or had any problems with it. A few weeks later, the driveway contractors come by and start ripping up our driveway bricks. One of the contractors knocks on our door and tells me that neighbor from hell's car is partially parked on our driveway, and that I know because our driveways have an outline/pattern to them indicating who owns what part of the driveway. The contractor told me that he went over to neighbor from hell's house and knocked on her door to ask her to move her car. However, she did not answer the door, locked the door and shut her blinds to cover her little window next to the door. The contractor asked me to knock on neighbor from hell's door to see if she can move her car off our property. I knock and stand at her door for about 10 minutes. I also put myself in front of a couple of security cameras she has, forgot to mention her cameras earlier, to show her it was me. When she finally comes out, she is yelling at me about the contractors thinking they were at her house to potentially mug her and break in. I apologized and explained what was going on. She also explained to me that her car was not on our property and that when she got her roof done 10 to 15 years ago, they told her that they laid their new roof up to the property line, which was way past the little driveway brick designs we have. Regardless, she moved her car and allowed us to use that part of her driveway. I gave her my cell number in case there were any more problems and told her that if she happens to get any parking tickets for being parked on the street for too long, we will happily pay them for her. Being confused about the property line, I pulled out the land survey that we received with the house and measured our side of the house up to the last inch. According to our land survey, that was not her property as she claimed. We also noticed that the property line she claimed was on an angle due to her crooked roofing and also included about a foot or so of our garage, which at that point I knew she was either lying or didn't know where her property line truly was. After clarifying that with our contractors, she somehow eavesdropped on our conversation. She texted me that evening about 10 PM stating, "We can no longer use her property to enhance our driveway," and that the property line was actually on an angle. I ignored the texts. During the next few days, the contractors worked on our new driveway. She would then come out to take pictures of the contractors and her property line and generally harass the contractors. She activated her car alarm, let her dogs bark, etc. When the contractors come to get me, I attempt to come out and show her our land survey, but by the time I get outside, she runs back into her house. This goes on for a few days. After a few more days of harassing our contractors, I finally text the previous owner of the house. He previously accidentally sent a package to our current house and I told him I would text him when it arrives, hence having his cell phone number, asking what kind of problems he had with the neighbor from hell. He calls me, which ends up being about a 15 to 20 minute conversation about how neighbor from hell would dispute the property line, to which the previous owner of our house had a land survey done, concluding that the property line is not where neighbor from hell claims it is. It is actually where we thought it was the whole time. Previous owner also had a camera installed close to the property line, which he sent me video of her staying on her actual side of the property line when having a verbal argument. On another occasion, he sent me a video of neighbor from hell hitting him with a shovel, which neighbor from hell pled guilty for. Neighbor from hell currently has a restraining order against her with our house due to this. Prior to the restraining order, she also called the police 40+ times on the previous owner, not sure why though. I also went back on Google Maps and noticed that neighbor from hell lined up a wall of bricks on the actual property line, the one from the land survey, not her made up one. Probably to mark her side with the previous owner of our house, and she currently has those bricks in her garage. This might be why she was avoiding us and never provided a land survey of her own. Now the driveway is done, but she still puts her garbage can on our driveway. After seeing photo and video evidence of her acknowledging the actual property line, my wife and I are convinced that she does this with everyone who owns our house. We ignore her garbage can because at this point we figure that she just does this for her own entertainment. We are also thinking that there might be some mental issues going on. I have a couple more stories about neighbor from hell. If people want more, I can post more stories. And yeah guys, in some countries people are very wary when it comes to purchasing homes where a murder happened or something like that, because some people think that the ghost of that person still roams around in that house. However, I bet most people would not expect that the neighbor might be a neighbor from hell, and I doubt that most home sellers are gonna mention how awful the neighbors are going to be. But then again, I also wouldn't want to live in a house where someone got murdered, but then again, I would also not wish to live in a house that is close to a Karen neighbor. Either way, if you enjoy the neighbor stories, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support the channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for stealing my neighbor's cat? So, my neighbor of 3 years has a cat. He has always been an indoor cat up the entire time I've known her, but about 2 weeks ago, for reasons I don't know, she has kicked the cat out of her house and now he is an outdoor only cat. Over the course of the month or so, I watched the cat's condition decline steadily, matting, fleas, getting skinny, etc. He also seemed really distressed being outside, always begging and meowing to try and get into people's houses. I felt bad for him and would let him in whenever he came asking and tried my best to take care of him. Until my neighbor came over and told me off for trying to steal her cat. I didn't want to cause trouble, so I stopped letting him in, but I still fed him. It was painful watching him suffer. 2 weeks ago was the last straw for me. The cat was hit by a car while crossing the road when the neighbor was not home. I saw it happen and rushed out to him to make sure he was alive. He was, and I took him to the emergency vet. He ended up having a leg amputated, and all in all, it cost me almost $3,000. I did not tell my neighbor what happened. I paid the price and told the vet the cat was a stray. They checked for a microchip, he didn't have one, and helped me contact the shelter to file a lost pet report. I took him home and have not let him outside at all since the accident. Here is where I may be the butthole. The stray holding period for my city is 5 days before an animal is considered abandoned, and since the neighbor has not claimed the cat through the shelter or asked me about him at any point in the past 2 weeks, I decided to keep him. Today my neighbor saw him lounging in my window and came over and said she had been looking for him all week. She demanded I give him back, and if not she would file a police report for me stealing him. I told her she must have the wrong cat as mine had 3 legs and shut the door in her face. She screamed through the door for a while and then left, still waiting to see if she calls the cops. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would love to hear from you what you think about this story. Do you think that OP is the a-hole for essentially stealing but also saving the cat of the neighbor? Let me know in the comments what you think. A user in the comments said, not the a-hole, if they did call the cops they would recognize you as the owner because you have the cat chipped and have medical papers to prove you're caring for the cat. And without having to lie, you can simply tell them you witnessed an apparent stray get hit by a car, appropriately waited the grace period of 5 days and claimed ownership when no one asked about it. That's legal. Edit to add, F your neighbors and good on you for giving the cat a good home. Update to the story. So I talked to my neighbor again when she came back today, and it turns out my neighbor's new boyfriend did not like the cat, so when he moved in, kicked the cat out, and now that they have broken up, she wants her cat back. I am keeping my kitty now and told her sorry, her cat went missing but the one in my house is mine. She seemed upset still but legitimately convinced my cat was not the same one when I showed her pictures of his 3 legs. As many of you have said, the life of the animal is more important than the morality of the theft here. And yeah guys, I think that is actually a very smart conclusion to the story. Who would have guessed really that theft can be moral? But in this situation it really makes sense. And the next one is titled, Oh, it's a neighborly day in the neighborhood. A bit of a trigger warning for this one. This story is concerned with a neighbor that poisons OP's dog. Like most of you, I've had my daily dose of a douchebag neighbor that I've had to deal with for quite some time. This is a series of small petty acts of revenge that eventually led up to one giant one. Here is a little background. I live out in the country in the Midwest. I love it out here. It is peaceful, quiet, comfortable. I live with my parents and 2 younger siblings on a farm. We have horses. My girls, I love them more than anything. They are as dear to me as cats are dear to Reddit. That's very true, by the way, guys. I'm not sure why Reddit is so obsessed with cats, but I am as well, so who am I to complain? Anyway, on my land, which is fairly spacious, I have 2 horses that are regularly in my pasture grazing. To the left of my property is a 50 feet wide rectangular shaped bit of land that runs the length of my property and belongs to a family friend. This friend gives us written permission to graze our horses on that land when the grass in the pasture is low. This comes into play later. The neighbors in question, let's call them Douchebag Dan and his wife, Bovine Bertha, a pretty visually accurate description for her, live on the other side of this 50 feet stretch of land. We sold these people the land they live on, and that was pretty much the end of our contact with them. They pretty much avoided contact with anyone. Their kids rode the bus with my siblings, and it turns out their kids were, attempting to be, the biggest bullies on the bus. In a small tight-knit community, that does not happen. Was this the start of Dan and Bertha's issue with us? The fact that my brother refused to allow their children to be dicks? Possibly. I will never know. Soon after school started, so too did Dan and Bertha's random attacks on us. At first it was mild. They placed a car battery in our side yard and then called the cops, claiming we had trash everywhere and were littering. Of course the sheriff drives out, sees the car battery, disposes of it and issues us a warning. We go on with life. When they get no reaction from us, they move up. They started calling the police and complaining about noise. This would happen maybe 1 to 2 times a week, a sheriff showing up at our door and asking what was happening. Of course we were confused because, like I said, we were pretty quiet people. Then again, we live out in the country. I could scream at the top of my lungs in my house and nobody outside would hear it, even if they were on my own property. This went on for a while, petty phone calls to the police station about random things that were not actually happening. Eventually, the police stopped coming. The whole boy who cried wolf thing, this is where the fun starts. Now that the police have stopped responding, we can have a little more fun. Fast forward through winter, of course more reports were made, but nothing came of it. Springtime hits, I am training my horses, and who would show up to my house but the ASPCA and an officer. They had received an anonymous report that I was beating my horse senseless. I was in a 70-foot wide round pen with nothing in my hands. I was making my horse run in a circle and that's it. They looked over my horse, went through all of my feet. I mean, these people tore my barn apart. What they were looking for? I don't know. It was embarrassing. I give lessons and lost 3 clients that day because they saw animal investigators on my property and pulled their children out of my program. Now I was pissed. They of course found no signs of abuse, came back twice more to randomly check and left me be. Where does the revenge begin, you ask? Oh, it is coming. As we get into summertime, douchebag Dan and bovine Bertha start having lunch parties, get-togethers, etc. They love to show off their pretty farmhouse to their city friends, so we found that every time people came over, it just happened to be a beautiful day and a great time to start up every tractor, mower, etc. that we had and make sure it was working properly. We even had a backhoe and my brother would just shake the bucket back and forth as fast as possible to make sure it didn't stick. Eventually, people stopped coming to visit them. The few occasions they still did turned out to be the perfect occasion to blast the Mr. Rogers theme song. Nothing should cheer a neighbor up more than hearing, "Oh, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood," as loud as we could make it blast. Then things took a turn for the worse. They didn't back off as I had hoped, they took it a step above and beyond. I had a dog, I have posted about him before. He was a beautiful black puppy, part wolf. This is one of the only pictures I have of him. They poisoned him with anti-freeze. So yeah guys, a really sad story here. This is one of the pictures that OP was talking about of his former dog. After that, my sister's birthday rolled around. I came home from shopping to find a cop in the neighbor's driveway and my younger horse in that 50-feet gap I mentioned, just grazing. I walked up to her, took her mane in my hand, and she followed me like a puppy to the pasture. I put her back in, and that was that. I walked my entire fence looking for where she got out, but found nothing. And then I realized I didn't have to unlock my gate to put her back, my padlock was missing. Someone had let her out. The next day, my mother was arrested. My mother, who has never had so much as a speeding ticket, was arrested and thrown in jail. You can be as annoying as you want to me, and for the most part I can ignore you, but you never F with my animals or my family. She was arrested on an animal at large charge. Long story short, the case was thrown out and she was released that day. Now I am pissed. Since then, they cut a whole section of my fence out and disposed of it, leaving a gaping hole. They have stolen my horse grain, they have done all sorts of little things. Why? I don't know. So I went into full pissed off mode. I was done. I took every opportunity to be as annoying as possible each time they were outside. For months I would uselessly wield a chainsaw if they went outside, start my dad's semi and just let it run. We even borrowed a friend's antique fire truck and would randomly start the siren at all hours of the night. Basically, we were the worst neighbors you could imagine. Trash magically found its way into their fenced-in backyard. Every huge-ass snake I could find made its way into their screened-in deck. Finally, they attempted to sell their house. Attempted. They were trying to sell a double-wide trailer on 5 acres of land for $200,000. Then after 2 weeks when they had no bids, blamed us and said because we had an unsightly property, nobody would move in next door. Yeah, this looks terrible, right? Here you can see a picture of OP's house, which does not look bad at all if you ask me. I found the site on which their house was listed and left a review as someone who had toured it about nasty smells in the carpet, stains on the walls, bedbugs, etc. you name it. Their house was removed from the site a week later. Whenever someone would come to look at the house, my sister would play with our other dog and get her to bark as much as she could. She is a tiny dog, you can imagine how annoying this is. But she only barks when you tell her to speak. You guessed it, nobody bought the house. I was planning on making their lives hell. They had a fight over something, probably not a great idea posting about it. In retrospect, it was a little silly to post it here, PM me if you really wanna know. Anyway, she confronted douchebag Dan about it, they got divorced, they lost the house, they were selling it because they couldn't afford to keep paying, and douchebag now lives with his mother and nobody has heard from Bertha in months. F with my family and I will F with yours. These are the terrible, bloodthirsty, yes, she said that in court, horses that started it all. The black one is almost 23. And here you can see one of OP's beautiful horses that he was talking about. And I gotta say, Ripe Stars, this was probably one of the best compilations of petty revenge in relation with Neighbors from Hell that I've ever seen on Reddit. You definitely don't want to be on the receiving end of OP, that is for sure. And Ripe Stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional Ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.